Welcome ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to try to make a new video about the top 10 tanks and tank destroyers which fought in the Second World War ranked. If you agree or disagree with this list, let me know in the comment section down below and let me know what you would change. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you guys enjoyed this video. Now let's get going. So we start off the list with 10th, the Yak Panther. People who've been watching my channel for a longer period of time, they know that the Yak Panther is one of my favorite vehicles of the Second World War era. So putting it in 10th position on the list does kinda hurt, but it's difficult to justify it in a higher spot. The Yak Panther is one of the strongest vehicles in a well dug in position, being armed with one of the most powerful main armaments of the Second World War. This was of course the 88mm L71 and it had a theoretical top speed of 46 km/h and it was a very good vehicle in a dug in position. And in addition to that, it had a good amount of frontal armor. One of the most famous engagements this vehicle has had was the first engagement where the two Yak Panthers were able to knock out 11 Churchills in a matter of only 2 minutes. One of the main drawbacks was that the vehicle didn't have a turret and also the tracks were a massive and easy target. But this in turn made the production for the Yak Panther a lot easier. 9th, the Matilda. Again, just like with the Yak Panther, this is one of my personal favorite vehicles, but it's very difficult to justify being placed any higher than the next couple of tanks. The Matilda, also known as the Queen of the Desert, had a wide variety of battles fought in every single theater. In the Pacific with the Australians, Eastern Europe with the Soviets, the British in Africa and Western Europe. In the early stages of the war there were very little things that could threaten the Matilda II, the only thing being the 88mm that Germany had, but these were only equipped on tanks in late 1942. Eventually, as expected, this tank got outdated. This was because eventually the main armament wasn't strong enough to compete with the German armor anymore. And in addition to that, the tank was just slow, but this was normal for an infantry tank. But it dominated the battlefield for 2 years. This might be a bit of a bold statement, but in my opinion the Matilda II is the most underrated tank of World War II. And then 8th we have the T-34. Before you comment how wrong I am for putting the T-34 in 8th, let me explain. The T-34 was a very formidable tank during the early stages of World War II. The Germans definitely had trouble with frontally challenging the T-34 for the first year. It came to a point where they just actually proposed to basically make a copy of the T-34 tank. Its effective armor combined with the overlapping gun early on was a great combination. However, most of the time the quality of the steel was lacking, and when the Germans eventually upgraded the Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks with better main armaments and also more armor, it got eventually overtaken in less than a year time, especially when Germany introduced vehicles like the Nashorn, the Yak Panther, the Tiger II and the list goes on. The T-34 became basically a snack for them. One of the main advantages, however, the T-34 had was speed. That was also relatively cheap to produce, and compared to other tanks on this list, was easier to maintain. But on the other side, it had an awful kill ratio during the war, making it impossible for me to put it any higher up on the list. In 7th we have the T-34-85. The T-34-85 was a formidable tank to a degree that you could make a case for it to be swapped with the 5th spot for sure and also the 6th spot. Because it had a very good gun, very good mobility, easy to produce to a point where the tank was produced 35,000 times in total, and it also had decent armor. However, at the time this tank became mass produced, this is in late 1943 or 1944, this armor was already vulnerable to most main armaments the German tanks used. Eventually after the war the Soviets decided to give this tank away to other countries where it served in wars like the Korean War. In 6th we have the Panzer IV. The Panzer IV was one of the only tanks which had seen combat from the first day to the end of the war, being considerably upgraded throughout the entire war. At the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, the Panzer IV was outclassed by the T-34-76, but every version after the F2 was simply better. In later versions it had a better armor, better gun, better optics, better visibility, safer for the crew and so on. The Panzer IV was eventually outclassed by tanks like the T-34-85 and the Sherman. It was in some occasions still able to tango with them, which in and of itself is still very impressive when you realize that the Panzer IV was there since the beginning of the war. The Panzer IV was not very spectacular in any way. It had some decent firepower, protection, reliability and speed, but to be fair, that was all Germany needed at the time. It was also used by other countries after the Second World War, securing 6th spot on the tank, just being edged out by the next tank. In 5th we have the Tiger I, one of the scariest tanks of World War II, or at least so we're led to believe. It was called Tiger phobia, being scared of engaging a Tiger I. It had a very impressive main armament. It was actually the first tank to be equipped with an 88mm. But to be fair, this is a less potent one than later versions like the Yak Panther was equipped with 2 years later. The Tiger also for the time had a very impressive amount of armor, being one of the heaviest armored German tanks fielded at the time. However, the reliability issues the Tiger I faced, including a very difficult tank to maintain, its low production numbers and eventually the armor not being good enough anymore, meant that it was only 5th on my list overall. For a heavy tank, it did however have a great top speed, and it also saw one of the best tankers fight in the Svrgo like Michael Whitman and Otto Carius. In 4th we have the IS-2. The fear factor was also present in the IS-2, but this time it was the Germans who actually feared this piece of machine. It was one of the strongest tanks which had fought in World War II, being produced almost 3 times as many times as the Tiger I. In addition, it had a more powerful gun, but at the same time it did not have the same quality in optics, rangefinder and visibility. But even famous Heinz Guderian had stated that if you're fighting in a Tiger I, you are not to engage the IS-2 alone because it was superior to the Tiger I. But we have to keep in mind that even though it was devastating to encounter an IS-2 in a tank-to-tank battle, it wasn't even made for this purpose. It was made to lead the break through fortified positions, and at this the tank was good as well. Eventually it took the Soviets 50 years after World War II to eventually phase out the IS-2 tank. In number 3 we have the Panther, of course one of the most expected suspects to include in a top 5 ranking. It was a formidable tank having great main armaments, it had a good shell velocity, sloped armor, great weight to power ratio, good frontal armor, even if its side was a bit vulnerable. But this eventually got dealt with to a certain degree by adding side skirts, and in addition to that it was one of the most produced German tanks during the Second World War after of course the Panzer IV. It, like most German tanks, had great optics, and there were very few Allied tanks which would be able to take on a Panther in a battle, and even less which would have a slight advantage over it. The reliability, however, also like most German tanks, was mediocre and was also overcomplicated and too heavy. But this reliability issue can also be traced back to the fact that Germany at this point was running out of crews which could operate such a delicate vehicle. Second is the Stug 3. This should be no surprise, and whenever I see someone make a list about the best armored vehicles of World War II, you rarely see the Stug 3 in the list, let alone in the top 3. The Stug 3 was the second most produced armored fighting vehicle of Germany in World War II, being only behind the SD KZ 251. The Stug 3 is in turn also responsible for taking out half of the armored fighting vehicles. It started out as a vehicle which was to deal with fortifications, but eventually also got upgrades that was to deal with armored vehicles. For example, the upgrade was an upgunned 75mm L40A main armament in 1942. In addition to all of this, it was also a very cost-effective vehicle, being 25% cheaper than a Panzer III medium tank. Also, especially in the beginning of World War II, it was very well armored. Not as good as the Matilda II or the Charbon Bis, but still well armored regardless. In the end, the effectiveness of the vehicle was somewhat down to the doctrine. Also, the low profile made it very easy to camouflage the vehicle and make it harder to hit. However, near the end of the war, it would struggle against most Soviet tanks. After the war, it still saw service in more wars, with the latest war being the Yom Kippur War. And in first we have the Sherman. I'm not sure if this tank needs a very long explanation. Everyone knows that the Sherman was safe for its crew, it was a versatile tank, had a lot of different versions for different purposes, like the Jumbo, the Firefly and the M4A3E8, which were definitely strong enough to go up against the German armor. With a powerful gun and strong frontal armor, it was also relatively easy to maintain due to the American economy. It was also easy to mass produce. It was not the most reliable tank, for example the Cromwell had better reliability, but it was very good regardless. After the war it was phased out, eventually replaced by the M26 and the Centurion, but it was still the best medium tank of the war. Honorable mentions are the KV-1, the M26 Pershing, the Tiger I, the Yak Panther IV 70V and the Churchill. Do you agree with me? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.